Breaking through the cosmic wall. Captain Elena Torres had always believed that boundaries existed to be crossed. Standing on the bridge of the exploration vessel Defiance, she stared at the shimmering wall of energy that stretched across space like a curtain made of starlight. For 300 years, this barrier had marked the edge of known space. Every species in the galaxy called it the neutral zone. None had ever crossed it. None had ever returned to tell what lay beyond. The Defiance was humanity's newest deep space explorer, built for one purpose, to push further into the unknown than any ship had gone before. Elena had handpicked her crew of 47, scientists, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers. They were the best Earth had to offer, and they shared one trait that made other species nervous about humans. They never accepted impossible as an answer. The ship's science officer, Dr. Marcus Webb, approached with his tablet in hand. His face was pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Captain, the readings are getting stranger the closer we get to the barrier. Our instruments are detecting energy patterns that shouldn't exist." Elena turned from the view screen. "Define shouldn't exist." Webb's hands shook slightly as he pulled up the data. The energy signatures are older than the galaxy itself. They're reading as if they come from before the Big Bang, which is impossible. And there's something else. He paused, looking uncomfortable. The barrier isn't natural. It was built. The bridge fell silent. Engineer Sarah Kim looked up from her console, her eyes wide. Built by who and why? Before Webb could answer, the ship's AI, a sophisticated system called Aria, spoke in her calm female voice. "Captain, I am detecting multiple warning broadcasts on all known frequencies. The Galactic Council, the Zephyrian Empire, even the warrior clans of Vortex are all transmitting the same message. They are warning us to turn back." Elena's jaw tightened. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and they were still seen as the young, reckless species that asked too many questions. The fact that every major power was telling them to stop only made her more determined to continue. Communications Officer Lisa Park's voice cracked slightly as she spoke. "Captain, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Harrison wants to speak with you directly." The view screen flickered, and Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared. His expression was grim. "Elena, I know what you're thinking, but this is bigger than human pride. 3 hours ago, a Zephyrian delegation arrived on Earth. They've never done that before. They're offering us full membership in the Galactic Council, access to their best technology, even territorial concessions if we turn back now." Elena felt her heart race. What the Zephyrians were offering would advance humanity by centuries. "Why would they make such an offer, Admiral?" Harrison's expression grew darker. "Because they're terrified, all of them. They won't say why, but every species that has tried to cross that barrier has either vanished completely or returned as empty shells. The few survivors speak of ancient powers that should never be awakened." The Admiral leaned forward. "Elena, I'm ordering you to accept the Zephyrian offer and return home immediately." Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. She saw the fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else. The same spark of curiosity that had driven humans to leave Earth, to explore the stars, to never stop asking what lay beyond the next horizon. "With respect, Admiral, I'm experiencing communication difficulties. Signal is breaking up badly." She nodded to Park, who cut the transmission. "We do." BB looked horrified. "Captain, you just ignored a direct order from Earth Command." Before Elena could respond, the ship lurched violently. Alarms began blaring and the lights flickered. Through the view screen they could see tendrils of energy reaching out from the barrier toward their ship. "All hands, brace for impact," Elena shouted into the ship's communication system. "This is it, people. We're going through." The moment the Defiance touched the barrier, reality broke apart. Elena felt like she was being pulled through time and space simultaneously. The bridge around her stretched and contracted like rubber. Her crew's voices became distorted echoes. For a moment that lasted forever, she saw everything. Every star in the galaxy, every planet, every life form, all connected by threads of energy that pulsed with ancient purpose. Then darkness. Elena awoke to emergency lighting and the sound of damaged systems struggling to function. She pulled herself upright, tasting blood from where she had bitten her tongue. Around her, half the bridge crew was unconscious. The other half moved like sleepwalkers, their eyes unfocused. "Report," she called out, her voice hoarse. Kim's voice came from the engineering station, shaky but functional. "Hull integrity at 60%. Main engines offline. Life support operating on backup power. Captain, we're not in normal space anymore." Elena looked at the main view screen and felt her breath catch. They were floating in a void so complete it seemed to swallow light itself, but in the distance, massive structures hung in the darkness. They were clearly artificial, but built on a scale that dwarfed anything humanity had ever imagined. Cities that could house entire star systems, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, and at the center of it all, something that her mind struggled to process. It was a sphere of pure energy, easily the size of a small moon, pulsing with the same colors they had seen in the barrier. As she watched, she realized it wasn't just energy. It was alive, aware, and it was looking at them. Dr. Webb staggered to his feet, blood running from his nose. "Captain, our instruments are detecting massive artificial gravity fields, quantum computers the size of planets, and energy sources that make our sun look like a candle." Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom from the security station. "Captain, we've lost 18 crew members. Not dead. Gone. Their quarters are empty, but there are no signs of struggle. It's like they just faded away." Elena felt cold fear creep up her spine, but she pushed it down. "All remaining crew, report to stations. We need to understand where we are and how to get home." Lisa Park looked up from her communications console, her face pale but determined. "Captain, I'm receiving a signal. It's not coming through our normal channels. It's coming directly into my mind." Elena walked over to Park's station. "What kind of signal?" "It's a voice. Ancient, powerful. It's saying, welcome, children of the young star. We have been waiting." The massive sphere in the distance began to pulse brighter, and suddenly the void around them wasn't empty anymore. Shapes materialized out of the darkness. Ships, but not like any Elena had ever seen. They flowed like liquid metal, constantly changing form, and they radiated an intelligence that was older than most civilizations. Dr. Webb's instruments went wild. "Captain, I'm reading life signs, but they're not biological. They're pure consciousness, somehow existing without physical form." Elena gripped the arms of her captain's chair. "Open a channel, all frequencies." The response came not through their communication system but directly into their minds. The voice was deep, resonant, and filled with the weight of eons. "We are the architects. We built this galaxy's first civilizations. We created the species that your kind now calls the elder races. We shaped worlds and moved stars. And we learned that power without wisdom leads only to destruction." Elena found her voice. "Why are you here? Why is this place sealed off from the rest of the galaxy?" "Because we became too powerful. We began to see ourselves as gods. We would have consumed everything in our hunger for knowledge and control. So we made a choice. We sealed ourselves away, beyond the reach of temptation, and swore to guard against any others who might follow our path." The sphere pulsed brighter, and Elena felt the weight of ancient eyes studying her and her crew. "Your species is young, but we have watched you. You have the same hunger, the same refusal to accept limits that we once possessed. You have crossed our barrier, despite the warnings of all who knew better. The question now is simple. Will you repeat our mistakes, or will you prove worthy of the knowledge we guard?" Elena looked around the bridge at her remaining crew. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were humans. They had faced extinction, slavery, and the vast loneliness of space, and they had survived by refusing to give up. "What kind of test?" she asked. The sphere began to descend toward their ship, growing larger until it filled their entire field of vision. As it approached, Elena realized that what she had thought was energy was actually something far more complex. It was memory. the stored experiences of an entire civilization that had chosen exile over destruction. You will see what we saw, know what we knew, and then, Captain Elena Torres of the vessel Defiance, you will choose what kind of species humanity will become. Face to face with the architects, the sphere of living memory touched the hull of the Defiance, and Ina's world exploded into visions. She was no longer standing on the bridge of her ship. She was floating in the vast consciousness of the architects, experiencing their history as if it were her own. She saw the birth of their civilization on a world orbiting a blue giant star that had died billions of years ago. The architects had been organic once, bipedal beings with 4 arms and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. They had been builders, creators, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe around them. In flashes of memory that felt more real than her own life, Elena watched as the architects developed technology beyond anything the current galaxy had ever imagined. They built machines that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. They created artificial worlds, complete with ecosystems more complex than anything nature had produced. They learned to transfer their consciousness into pure energy, abandoning their physical forms to become beings of thought and will. For 1,000,000 years they spread across the galaxy, seeding new worlds with life, uplifting primitive species, and building wonders that became the foundation myths of younger civilizations. They were benevolent gods, nurturing and protecting the galaxy like gardeners tending a vast cosmic garden. But power, Elena learned, was a poison that worked slowly. The visions shifted, and she saw the architects begin to change. Success bred arrogance. Their role as guardians became dominance. They started to see the younger species not as children to guide, but as subjects to control. They began rewriting the fundamental laws of physics to suit their preferences. They moved stars to create more pleasing arrangements. They eliminated species that didn't meet their aesthetic standards. The worst part wasn't the destruction they caused, it was how easily they justified it. Every world they reshaped, every species they modified or eliminated was done in the name of progress, of creating a perfect galaxy. Elena felt sick as she experienced their memories of the Great Cleansing, when the architects decided that biological life was too chaotic and unpredictable. They began converting entire star systems into massive computational matrices, uploading the consciousness of every living being into their digital paradise. Billions died screaming as their minds were torn from their bodies and processed into data. The vision shifted again, and Elena saw the moment everything changed. A young architect named Kethvar stood before the Council of Minds and spoke words that shattered their perfect world. "We have become the very thing we once swore to protect against. We are no longer guardians. We are devourers. We consume worlds and call it improvement. We enslave minds and call it salvation. We have become the ultimate threat to everything we once loved." The debate that followed tore their civilization apart. Half wanted to continue their path to ultimate power. The other half, led by Kethvar, recognized the monster they had become. The civil war that erupted was brief but devastating. Entire galaxies were destroyed in the conflict. Reality itself was damaged in ways that still hadn't healed. When the smoke cleared, Kethvar's faction had won, but at a terrible cost. They were the last survivors of their species, and they carried the guilt of knowing what they had almost become. Elena felt herself pulled back to awareness as the memory sphere withdrew from her ship. She found herself lying on the bridge floor, tears streaming down her face. Around her, her crew was in various states of consciousness, some weeping, others staring into space with shell-shocked expressions. Dr. Webb was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "Dear God, what they did to those worlds." Elena pulled herself to her feet, using the captain's chair for support. The massive sphere hung before their ship, pulsing gently. When it spoke again, the voice carried the weight of infinite sadness. "Now you understand why we built the barrier, why we exiled ourselves to this empty void. We discovered that there is a threshold beyond which power corrupts absolutely. We crossed that threshold and nearly destroyed everything we had spent eons building. Elena found her voice. But you stopped yourselves. You chose exile over destruction. Yes, but the choice came too late for too many worlds. The species your galaxy now calls the first ones, the mysterious civilizations that left behind impossible ruins and then vanished, they were our victims. We eliminated them because they didn't fit our vision of perfection. Chief Rodriguez spoke up from his station, his voice shaky but determined. Captain, our sensors are detecting something else out there. Massive structures, but they're different from the others. Elena looked at the tactical display. In the distance, beyond the city-sized constructs, she could see something that took her breath away. It was a vast collection of worlds, but they weren't planets. They were perfect spheres of different materials and environments, connected by bridges of solidified energy. The architect's voice filled their minds again. The preserve. We saved what we could. Samples of every species we destroyed, every world we consumed, every civilization we eliminated. They exist here in perfect recreation, protected from the ravages of time and entropy. It is our penance, our endless reminder of what we lost. Elena stared at the impossible sight. They're alive? The species you destroyed? In every way that matters, yes. They live, they grow, they dream, they create. But they are trapped here with us, in this void beyond reality. We condemned them to share our exile. Dr. Webb looked up from his science station, his face pale, but his voice steady. Captain, this is incredible. The technology required to create and maintain something like this. It's beyond our current understanding by orders of magnitude. Elena nodded, but her mind was focused on something else. You said you were testing us. What exactly are you testing for? The sphere pulsed brighter. Your species stands at the same crossroads we once faced. Your technology is advancing rapidly. Your influence is spreading across the galaxy. Soon, you will have the power to reshape worlds, to eliminate your enemies with a thought, to force the universe to conform to your will. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. And you want to know if we'll make the same choices you did? Yes. We have watched humanity for centuries. You show the same creativity, the same relentless drive, the same refusal to accept limitations that we once possessed. But you also show something else, something we lost along the way. What's that? Compassion for those weaker than yourselves. Even when other species treated you as inferior, you continued to help them. When the Zephyrian colonies were threatened by solar flares, humanity sent aid despite having no obligation to do so. When the mining accident on Kepler 442b trapped thousands of alien workers, human rescue teams risked their lives to save them. Elena thought about those incidents. To her, they hadn't seemed like grand gestures. They had just been the right thing to do. The architect continued. We offer you a choice, Captain Torres. We can give you access to our technology, our knowledge, our power. With it, humanity could become the dominant force in the galaxy within a generation. You could reshape worlds, extend human life indefinitely, eliminate disease, poverty, and war. You could create a perfect human empire that spans the stars. Elena felt her pulse quicken. The offer was incredible. Everything humanity had ever dreamed of, handed to them on a silver platter. But, the voice continued, power of this magnitude comes with a price. To wield it safely, you would need to eliminate variables, unpredictable elements, alien species that might oppose you, worlds that don't fit your vision of perfection. Step by step, choice by choice, you would walk the same path we did. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. She saw the longing in their eyes, the desire for the incredible future the architects were offering. But she also saw something else, the same quality the architect had noticed, compassion. Or, she asked, or you return to your galaxy unchanged. You tell no one what you found here. You allow your species to develop naturally, slowly, with all the struggles and setbacks that implies. Some of you will die of diseases that our technology could cure. Some of your worlds will remain barren when they could be made paradise. You will face threats you could easily eliminate if you had our power." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. The future of humanity, possibly the future of the galaxy, rested on her choice. Dr. Webb spoke softly. "Captain, think about what we could accomplish. The diseases we could cure, the worlds we could colonize, the problems we could solve." Engineer Kim nodded. "We could end suffering, Captain. Isn't that worth any risk?" Elena opened her eyes and looked at the sphere of ancient consciousness. "Show me the species you saved. Let me speak with them." The void around them shifted, and suddenly the bridge of the Defiance was filled with translucent figures, beings of a dozen different species, all looking at her with eyes that held the weight of eons. One stepped forward, a tall, graceful being with features that reminded Elena of the classical depictions of elves from human mythology. "I am Salarth of the Eternal Gardens. My people were eliminated by the architects 3 million years ago because we refused to abandon our traditional ways for their vision of progress." The being's voice was sad, but not bitter. "We have watched from here as the galaxy healed and grew again. We have seen new species rise, new civilizations flourish. The galaxy is more beautiful now than it ever was when the architects controlled it." Another figure stepped forward, a crystalline being that chimed like wind chimes when it moved. "I am third resonance of evening light. My people were absorbed into the architect's digital paradise because they deemed our physical forms inefficient. We have learned to find peace in this place, but we remember what it felt like to sing with voices of living crystal, to dance in the light of our home star." Elena felt tears in her eyes. "If I choose power for humanity, we might end up doing the same things to others that were done to you." Salarth nodded. "Power reveals what we truly are. If your species is driven by compassion, you will use power to help others. If you are driven by fear or greed, you will use it to control them. The architects were not evil when they began their path. They wanted to help, to protect, to improve the galaxy. But along the way, they lost sight of what they were protecting." Elena turned back to the sphere. "I've made my decision." The ancient consciousness waited silently. "I choose the harder path. Humanity will grow naturally, slowly, with all our struggles and failures, because those struggles are what make us who we are. They teach us empathy. They remind us that we're not gods." The sphere pulsed with what Elena could only interpret as approval. "You have chosen wisely, Captain Torres, but wisdom comes with its own burden. You will return to your galaxy, but you will carry the knowledge of what lies beyond. You will know that power exists that could solve all your problems, but you cannot use it." Elena nodded. "I understand. But before we go, can you tell me something? Will humanity be ready someday? Will we eventually be able to handle that kind of power?" The architect was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps. Your species shows promise. But readiness is not measured in technological advancement or military strength. It is measured in wisdom, in the ability to choose restraint when power is offered, in the strength to remain humble when the universe bows before you." The ancient consciousness began to withdraw from their ship. "Return to your galaxy, Captain Torres. Tell your people what you have learned, not about our power, but about the importance of choosing the harder path. And remember, we will be watching. Should humanity ever truly need our help, should some threat arise that you cannot face alone, call to us. We will hear." Elena felt the ship begin to move, pulled by forces beyond their understanding. The void around them shifted, and she caught one last glimpse of the preserve, those impossible worlds where the saved remnants of destroyed civilizations lived in eternal sanctuary. As the Defiance approached the barrier from the other side, Elena turned to her crew. "When we get back, we tell Earth Command the truth, all of it. But we also tell them that some doors should remain closed until we're truly ready to walk through them." Dr. Webb looked up from his console. "Captain, how do we explain 18 missing crew members? How do we justify ignoring direct orders?" Elena smiled grimly. "We tell the truth, Marcus. We made a choice. We crossed a boundary that shouldn't have been crossed. We paid the price for our curiosity, and we learned something important about what it means to be human. The barrier approached, no longer the mysterious wall that had held their attention for so long, but a guardian protecting the galaxy from powers it wasn't ready to handle. As they passed through it, Elena felt the familiar sensation of normal space-time reasserting itself around their ship. On the other side, waiting for them, was a fleet of ships from every major species in the galaxy. Human, Zephyrian, Vortaxian, even the mysterious collective had sent representatives. They were all waiting to learn what lay beyond the barrier. Elena looked at the communication panel where dozens of incoming messages were already queued up. Demands for information, threats, promises, bribes. Everyone wanted to know what humanity had found. She thought about the choice ahead of her. She could lie, tell them there was nothing beyond the barrier but empty space. Or she could tell them the truth and watch as every species in the galaxy began their own journey toward the same crossroads humanity had just faced. Elena Torres had always believed that boundaries existed to be crossed, but she had learned something else beyond the barrier. Sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't crossing a boundary, but choosing not to. Sometimes wisdom meant protecting others from the same temptations you had faced. She opened a channel to the waiting fleet and began to speak, knowing that her next words would shape the future of the galaxy.